lesson on Primavera for shutdown, turnaround, and outage, I'm going to show you how it's possible in your Gantt chart to represent the longest path, critical jobs, near critical jobs, and non critical in the Gantt chart using the basic stoplight approach. Here you're going to see that I'm using a longest path with zero float for a system. In this case, I have my mechanical system, and within this mechanical system, I have a longest path. Now, remember, longest path could be critical or non critical. For example, reactor catalyst changeouts are long, but they're not as critical as, say, a project could be. So we're setting the longest path as a definition with zero remaining float. And many of you will recognize that critical is also identified as zero float in most projects. Here I'm using it as the longest path and hence the lighter shade of red. When I get into critical jobs, I'm talking about any activities or jobs with less than 24 hours of float. And here I'm going to make this red. And I want this to automatically turn colors in the Gantt chart according to the filters I apply and the method that I have applied for calculation. In the near critical jobs, I'm looking at anything less than 72 hours of remaining float. It will turn yellow. Anything on non-critical that is greater than 72 hours will remain green with enough float. And here you'll see my float bars bouncing off of my process availability window called the TAR 28 mechanical phase. So let's take a look now at what the filters are for the bars. And first of all, how we create those. So we go in and we add additional bars and call them the longest path, the critical, and near critical. I use the remaining bar setting. I choose my colors and my bar style. And then here I click to pull up my filter. And in this case, the filter is remaining float equals 0. When I look at critical work, the filter for critical work is anything within the range of 1 hour to 24 hours. And when I look at near critical, the filter for near critical is remaining float within the range of 25 hours to 75 hours. So one more thing to remember, that to get these bars to override the green or remaining work bar, you must go in and add another filter that says remaining float is greater than 72. So remaining float is greater than 72. So I make remaining float is greater than 73 hours in order to capture my 72 hours for the yellow band. So you'll see here that if I was to change the burn up float, when we talk about burning float, remember float is absolutely important to us and we don't want to be burning float. But if we are burning float for whatever reason and we become increasingly more uh, to a level of burning float, and for this example, I'll go with 389 duration. Now I'm down to 43 of remaining float, so it has turned this bar to yellow. So when I go back to look at the float remaining is greater than 72 hours, I'm in good shape here. Even though I don't want to burn float, I do have the opportunity for this activity either to start later and finish later, which is not burning float. But if it has started and it continues to drag on, then I am truly burning float, which is expensive. So again, if this activity becomes a higher amount of or a less amount of remaining float, then things are going to start to turn red. Okay, so these are some of the things that I think it's really important for us to be able to understand, just from a a presentation standpoint. that when we look at how to track automatically what is going on with our activities in a Gantt chart view, automatically starting to show what's going to happen when my activities become more critical. And again, the difference between longest path and critical path is that the longest path, yes, has zero float within a system or within a unit or a train or a process. But remember that the longest path isn't always the critical. And we don't really look at critical path in terms of there are multiple critical paths in turnaround environments. You'll see here that in my shutdown window, I would have a path. I could have it in my mechanical window, my startup window here in red. And I think it's important that people understand how that this can be managed, and that as we look at what people refer to as critical path or critical work, we don't want to take our eye off of this because we do not want negative float. That's our job as schedulers and controllers, analysts, to bring that back and reduce that negative float and make it more either zero or positive float. But also to keep our eye on these ones that can go near critical, because quite often, while we're looking at what people refer to as critical path, we're getting blindsided by other activities or jobs that are sneaking up on us that do not allow us to start up because we missed the fact that we were burning float. Okay, so that's the lesson for today. Thank you for joining.